Hi friends, welcome to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Caitlin and I like to film eyeshadow palette ranking and review videos as well as the occasional other beauty content sprinkled in. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, I highly recommend that you hit that subscribe button because I post 2 videos every single week and you're just seeing my hands because we're doing my eyeshadow palette collection and declutter video today. I was waiting to do this video until I got my nails done, which obviously I didn't, but I was like, you know what? I just need to get some of this stuff out of my collection. I'm feeling overwhelmed, so we're gonna do it. So we're gonna do this a little bit different because I've already gone through and picked most, if not all of the palettes I will be decluttering today. They're all right here, so wanted to walk through those first, and then we'll go through, so kind of like the decluttering first, and then a collection video with possibly a couple of palettes going during that. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. This is the Kaleidos quad. This is Glowing Iris. I have only used this palette once, but I've discovered that I don't really love quads. And I debated like maybe I might try and depot this one. I don't know how difficult that'll be given this packaging. I might just leave it in the packaging because it's cute in the packaging and just pass it along to a friend. But I don't really reach for quads, so I don't see myself really utilizing this. So it's gonna go. Well, okay. This is the Flowing Haze quad. Same thing. I don't really reach for quads, so I just don't see the point in having them in my collection. Again, like I said, I might consider trying to depot them to put them in like a big magnetic palette, but we'll see about that. Okay, I'm scooting a little bit closer. All right. Next up is the Odin's Eye Erd palette. I like this palette. I really like the like kind of tones of the greens here, and I think both of these shimmers are really nice. I don't love that this really dark green shimmer is in here. I don't know what to do with it. I don't use it. So it honestly kind of holds me back from reaching for this palette. So we're gonna go ahead and pass this one along. Next up is the Huda Beauty Nude Light palette. This palette is stunning. I had the nude, light, medium, and then rich. I decluttered the medium a while ago because I didn't feel like I needed both the medium and the rich palette. But anyways, I have not used this palette all year. I keep track of every eyeshadow palette that I use every day, and I did not reach for this palette once this year. So to me, if I haven't reached for it in a year, I'm probably not gonna miss it. So this is gonna go. Same story with the Nude Rich. I did not reach for this palette at all this year. While I think the color story of this palette is really pretty, I'm pretty sure I have other palettes where I can replicate this. And I also haven't reached for it in a year. So I feel like if I haven't used it in a single year, I obviously am not gonna miss it. Keeping along the Huda Beauty train, this is the Color Block palette. This is the blue and yellow palette. I did not like the quality of this palette, and that alone prevents me from ever wanting to use it beyond when I did my review. So since I wasn't a fan of this one, I'm gonna pass it along. Same with the purple and orange one. There's still sticky notes on some of these. I didn't like the quality of this one. I don't really love how they did the like all dark or mid-tone purple shimmers. I felt like there could have been a lighter purple shimmer in here. Yeah, and then this dark purple matte. Anyways, I love this color story because I am a big Phoenix Suns fan, so part of me wanted to keep it, but I just thought to myself, when I want to do a Phoenix Suns kind of look, am I going to reach for this, or am I just going to reach for palettes that have purples and then another palette that has oranges? And I'm probably going to do that over reaching for this since I don't like the quality. So this one's gonna go. Alien Cosmetics, Now Unearthly Cosmetics. This is the Lore palette. I really do like this palette. I think all of the shimmer shades are special duochrome shades, but when I looked at my duochrome multi-chromes that I've picked up this year, I kind of have the shades that I like in here, which is Serpent, Sphinx, Medusa. So I think I'm gonna let this one go. I don't know why I said I think, I already decided, but I'm gonna pass this one along. Although I do really love the like Medusa packaging, and I think it's really nice, and I like Unearthly's quality a lot. We gotta make choices. We gotta get rid of this stuff. Oh, let me talk about this palette. This is the Dominique's Cosmetics. This is the Berries and Cream palette. I had this palette forever ago and decluttered it, and then I just got this one for Christmas, so I will be giving this away to someone or donating it since it is brand new, still in the packaging, have never used it. This is the Ace Beauté Classical Paradise. I really like this palette. I just did not reach for this palette this year either, and so I feel like if I haven't reached for it in a year, I'm probably not going to reach for it next year, so this one's going to go. But I do really like this color story, and I really like this palette a lot, so it makes me kind of sad, but yeah, we're going to let this one go. This is the Ace Beauté Paradise Fallen palette. This is another one that I have not reached for this year. I really love this color story. I love the cool tones, the warm browns, and then the purples. I think it's stunning, but if I haven't reached for it, I'm probably not going to. And yeah, so I'm gonna let this one go. Another Unearthly Cosmetics palette. This is the Strawberry Milkshake palette. This is a really fun color story. I really do like it, but I feel like I have palettes that have these pinks and greens in there that I'm more likely to reach for than this one, so I'm gonna let this one go. Although it kind of makes me sad because I really like this palette and I like the packaging, but I was much harsher when I picked these out. Now I'm backtracking. This is the Lethal Cosmetics 1-Up palette. This palette is gorgeous, kind of similar to Lure in that I got this for all of the special shimmery shades, which I feel like I have now elsewhere in my collection. I don't think these have anything special to them. I might try and depot this one. Maybe, we'll see. I already ordered a few empty magnetic palettes, so some of these palettes, if I can put them all in one spot. So I'll show you. I'll put these 3. I'm gonna keep in like a potential depotting palette situation. This is the Nomad Cosmetics Orient Express palette. This palette is like very heavily neutral with like pops of primary colors and then a few greens. It's really nice. I did like it. I enjoyed using it. It's just, I've had this a while. This color story, unless I'm doing like my Nomad Cosmetics series where I want to use each Nomad palette, I just don't really find myself reaching for this one. I think I may be doing a Nomad Cosmetics ranking, so I might hold on to this long enough to do that video. But if I'm at an even number without this palette, then this one's just gonna go. But if I need it to make it an even number, I'll keep it. But it would really only be used for that, and then it'd be going after that. So I'm ready to part ways with this one. It gave me a good time, but our time together has come to an end. Pat McGrath Labs. This was the Celestial Odyssey palette. This was the holiday palette that she released in 2021, and I liked it. I didn't love it. So I want to make sure my collection is things that I love. So I'm going to go ahead and let this one go. Another Pat McGrath palette. This is the collab with Bridgerton, and this is another palette that I like a lot, but I don't necessarily love it. I think the quality is really nice. It's just a little bit too boring for me, and I don't see myself reaching for it, and I don't want it to just take up space in my collection, so I'm gonna let this one go. Here I am shocking everyone. These are the Glamlight and Scooby-Doo palettes. This is the Rutro Raggy palette, and then here is the Creeps and Crawls palette. I didn't love the quality on these, and then I wasn't a huge fan of this particular color story. I just found it hard to like figure out what to do because everything was so dark. This one I thought had a better color story, but this is basically the color story of the It's Freaking Bats palette, which I already have. So I'm gonna pass these along. I'm sure I have a friend that will want these. Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. This is what the inside looks like. I didn't reach for this one this year either, and I know that's so shocking because look at how beautiful it is. But yeah, I just didn't gravitate towards this one at all, so I'm gonna let it go because it's obviously not getting used in my collection. Also, I have friends like that I know in real life, and then I have really good friends on social media that I will talk about giving these to. Please don't ask for free makeup in the comments. I just feel uncomfortable sending used makeup to people that I don't know well. So if you're one of my friends, and I know you know who you are that are my friends, I will gladly pass these along to you. But yeah, like I said, just people I don't know, I don't feel super comfortable sending used makeup to. But anyways, this is the Lois Cosmetics palette. I don't like the shimmers in this palette, but I really do like the mattes, and I like kind of the color story of the mattes. So this is another one that if I can figure out how to depot palettes, I might
do that with this one. If you like depotting videos, let me know, because maybe that's something that I can make. This is my combination of the Sydney Grace and Tim Talia palettes. It's in the Quintessence packaging, but I just combined all the shades I liked from all three, basically all the shimmer shades I liked, and I put them in one palette. This one, I'm keeping this palette because these are the 26 millimeter pans. So I'm going to take these out. A few of these shades I will save, like the Milky Way, Aurora, maybe Parallax, Celestial Blue. Well, those aren't the actual names of the shades. That's just where they're at in this palette. Anyways, I may save a few of these shades in like a magnetic palette, but I'm going to keep this packaging mainly to create color stories with the other pans. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm taking it out of my collection. It's mainly going to be broken down for either single eyeshadow use or like the ability to put 12 shades together and take a picture with it for social media, if that makes sense. I don't think that did. Anyways, this is the Kai Love Beauty Impressionism palette. I actually just got this palette this year, and yeah, it was a good reminder of why, if I don't pick up a palette when it first launches, I probably shouldn't pick it up later, because I'm obviously not that interested in it. I think this is a pretty color story. It's just not something that like I've like had to force myself to use it. So I don't really see myself getting a ton of use out of it. So I'm gonna let this one go. Okay, this is the Serenity palette. This is a collab with Menagerie and Annette's Makeup Corner. And I feel really bad because I love Annette, and I do really like the shade right here. But yeah, I just didn't reach for this palette this year at all. I didn't grab for it. So I just feel like it's another one that I need to let go. If I haven't used it in a year, I know I'm a broken record at this point, but if I haven't used it in a year, I'm probably not gonna use it next year. So okay, this is the Lime Crime Greatest Hits Bangers palette, and I want to like this palette, but I think I just don't love these shimmer shades. I think the mattes are all really nice. Some of the shimmers look nice. They're just more soft, more subtle. That's what Lime Crime's formula tends to be, and I think I've just moved on from that. So this doesn't really do anything for me anymore. So I'm gonna pass this one along. This one has been my test dummy for practicing depotting shadows, but this is the Lime Crime Venus XL2, and you can see that I destroyed the shade trying to depot. But anyways, I practiced on a few of the shades just to, get good at it. This palette is like over 4 years old, so it's definitely well past its expiration date. I've gotten a decent amount of use. I know it doesn't look like it, but I really have used this palette quite a bit and really enjoyed it. So I think I'm just ready to move on from it. I have the Retro Glam now that's similar, but a newer version. So I'm going to keep this one for practicing depotting before I ruin shadows that I actually want to keep. But beyond that, it's going to get trashed because, like I said, it's definitely well past its expiration, and I don't want to give that to anybody. This was the last Anastasia Beverly Hills palette I had. This is the Jackie Aina palette, and while I loved this palette a lot, I'm just not interested in supporting Anastasia Beverly Hills anymore. You can Google just the different things that they've done. There's been quite a few controversies, so they're just not a brand that I want to continue to feature. And that being said, that doesn't really leave room for me to like reach for this, and I just haven't reached for it this year. So I think it's time to say thank you to this one and let it go. This is the Kai Love Beauty Honore palette. I think I said in my video, my declutter last year, that I was going to get rid of this palette, but it made its way back into my collection. I wasn't ready to let it go quite yet. I do think I used it maybe once this year, but yeah, it's pretty. Don't get me wrong. It's just not one that I think I need. So ready to let this one go, although it makes me sad because the packaging is absolutely gorgeous. This is the Beauty Bay New Mood palette. I did just get this palette this year. I don't really know what I was thinking because this color story is a little bit all over the place. I really don't see myself reaching for this again, so I'm gonna let this one go. Drench Cosmetics and Neon MUA. This is Lunar Retrograde. I do really like this palette, and I loved the shades Into the Universe and Love to Dream, but I have duochromes that look very similar to that, those two shades, in my loose pigment collection. So I just don't really think I need to keep this one. I don't think it's adding anything to my collection, so I'm gonna let this one go.
This is the Candy Skies palette from Laura Lee, and Erin Weaver, I should say. This palette's pretty. I just don't tend to reach for an all pastel palette, but this is for sure a palette, if I can figure out how to depot, this one's getting depotted, because I do think these shades are really pretty in combination with other shades, but I don't want to like a whole palette taking up room in my collection if I'm probably not going to reach for it. But yeah, like picture, okay, here, let's just see my vision really fast. Okay. Like, I'm almost positive these are all the 26. Ooh, the Laura Lee ones might be a little bit too big, but, or maybe the Lowest Cosmetic ones are too small. That's probably more accurate. But anyways, I'm just saying, like, if I put all of these or the shades I like out of all of these, because like I like these shimmers, I like these shimmers, I don't like these shimmers, but I like these mattes. But if I put all of them together, like, I feel like I could create something really pretty that I would actually reach for. So that's what I want to try and do. And then I didn't throw those in there, but if I could figure it out with those, I would totally throw those in too. Okay, last up, this was one of my favorite palettes of all time in my collection. I'm a little bit sad to let it go, but to be honest, because I did actually reach for it this year, but I reached for it when I brought it to New Orleans for my bachelorette party, and all I did was like a smoky eye with those shades and slapped glitter all over it, which I could do with a ton of other palettes in my collection. So yeah, I don't think this is adding anything anymore, but it makes me really sad because this is like the one Urban Decay palette that I still like, but the shimmer shades just aren't quite as special as I like them to be now. So I think I'm ready to let this one go, but it's so pretty. I really do love this one, and it has served me well the last, like, what, 2-3 years, however long I've had it. So anyways, those are all the palettes that I'm for sure getting rid of. Now let's move on into the collection part of the video and see which palettes are staying. I just realized I never talked about these two palettes. So this is the Lunar Beauty Greek Goddess palette. This is another one that I've had forever that I just don't think adds a lot to my collection, but I love Lunar Beauty so much, and I don't know why I'm sentimental about these two palettes, but I am. So I'm gonna keep these just like for decorative purposes in this room, but I'm not gonna use them anymore. This is the Life's a Drag palette. I got the Life's a Drag facelift, so I'm just gonna use that one since it's newer, but similar to the other one, for some reason I just feel really sentimental about these. So I'm keeping these, but not actually in my like collection that I'm using. And like, look, do you like all that hand movement? Anyways, okay, but now let's get into the collection video. Okay, so I totally forgot that there's two other palettes that I'm taking out of my collection, but also feel sentimental about and don't want to get rid of. So this is the Natasha Denona Safari palette. This was my first ever Natasha Denona palette, and this was the palette that, like, I bought this one on sale. I just had never had such a luxury makeup item before when I purchased this one. So for, that reason, it just means a lot to me. But I used this palette recently, and the mattes just really did not work for me. So I'm going to keep this one. I also like the idea of being able to, like, maybe use some of these mattes in combination with some of the other big palettes that she has to, like, create a color story. Because I think I'm getting into that for Instagram purposes. But like I said, the matte quality on this has really deteriorated over the last few years. So, and if you hear that, it's like, okay, anyways. So I'm keeping that one, but like not in my like regular rotation of use. Those are the ones that I'm keeping in like a keepsake box. I've talked about this before on my channel. This is the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette. This is the palette that was somewhat involved in my husband's proposal to me, so I'm gonna keep this one just for memory purposes. I actually was gonna get rid of this when I was, I guess, not in a sentimental mood, and then I got roasted alive on TikTok for wanting to do that, so I will keep this. It will stay with these palettes. This is definitely the most sentimental of the bunch, so I guess, yeah, anyways, I'm keeping these. Now I promise we will be moving into just the full collection portion of the video. Okay, so I have all of my palettes kind of stacked by brand. They are not in any particular order. I figured we'd go through each stack where I have multiple palettes from one brand, and then kind of move on to the end, talk about palettes like where I just have one from the brand. But anyways, we'll start with the stack since it's right in front of me. This is the Unearthly Cosmetics stack. I know that says Alien Cosmetics. They changed their name. This is the Don't Be Jelly palette. And I went back and forth on decluttering this one because I do feel like I have a lot of special shades in my collection now, but I don't think I have these
like 4 right here. And then I do still really like, and I didn't want to swatch, but I mean, come on, look at that. I don't think you're going to be able to see the shift of it, but oh, it's so pretty. So anyways, I'm giving this one. Okay, I don't plan to actually continue to swatch. This is the Weirdos palette. This is one of the palettes they launched for Halloween this year, and I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. So this is the Creepy Crawly palette. This is one of the quads that was in their Halloween box, and I know I just decluttered other quads earlier because I don't really reach for them, but I feel like these quads are kind of like a unique color story, so I felt like keeping these more. But anyways, this is the Creepy Crawly quad. Then we have the Thirst quad, and I really like this one, even though I don't normally like red eyeshadow, but this like orangey red up top is incredible. I also really like the packaging on these. This is the Chilling quad. I love the differences in like the types of purple that they included in this one. This is Warms My Blood. That is what that palette looks like. I love it. This is the collab they did with Chippo Gray. This is the Rudo Ruame palette. I can never say it. This is, I know, like basically a rainbow color story, but these duochromes at the bottom are gorgeous. I love this one. This is the So Strange palette, and I think this is an amazing color story. I absolutely love it. This duochrome that's like a yellow pink, it's so stunning at the bottom. This is the 1964 palette, and I feel like a lot of people sleep on this one, but I think it's so amazing. I really like the color story on this one. Oh, I need to probably blot that shade because it's getting quite a bit of oil seepage, but whatever. Anyways, next up is a brand that I just tried for the first time this year. This is Simply Posh Cosmetics, but I really like the packaging that they do, and I really like the structure of these palettes. So yeah, they've got me hooked now. This is the Fairy Tale Fairies. This is a little bit more pastel. It's why I feel like I can let go of the Candy Skies palette from Laura Lee, although I do still want to try and depot that palette if I can, because I like a lot of the shades in there. But this palette is stunning. I really like it. This is the Genuine Gems palette. This palette is absolutely gorgeous, and I really love that they do magnetic palettes, so I can pop the shades out of either palette and kind of mix it up and create more of a custom color story, and I cannot wait to see what this brand launches next. Filming these always sounds fun in theory, and then when I sit down to do them, my like back hurts. I'm tired. I don't want to keep going through all of them, but anyways. All right, this is the Lethal Cosmetics Night Flower palette. I absolutely adore this palette. I think it is incredible. And then I have the 2 collabs that they did with Teresa Is Dead. So we have Lethal Is Dead and Teresa Is Lethal. Lethal Is Dead looks like this, kind of like a grungy pastel color story. It's really interesting. And then Teresa Is Lethal it's slightly more colorful sister that has the most amazing silver metallic in it. I love this. I love anything space themed, so the fact that this has like a UFO on it, I would have bought it no matter what the inside looked like. And I love Teresa Is Dead, so there's that too. Okay, let's talk about Kai Love Beauty. So this is the Triumph of Venus palette. I think this is a really interesting color story, and I don't know what it is. I just find it really interesting to look at, and I want to keep it and play around with it in my collection. So I really like that palette. This is the Van Gogh palette. This one is amazing because it's like a grungy primary color story, and you know, like you got the red, yellow, blue. You also have green and brown, but like, I don't know, it gives me primary color vibes. I really like this palette. It definitely gives you a grungy look when you use it. This is the Rococo palette. I think this one is so pretty. Every time I've done a look with this palette, I've just felt like I look like pretty at the end of the look. So I really like this palette, and I definitely want to try and reach for it a bit more. This is the Les Jardins Volume 2. I just picked up this palette. They had like a buy one, get one free, and that's when I picked up the Impressionism palette in this palette. I'm getting rid of the Impressionism because I've had to like force myself to use it, but I've had a really fun time pulling this one. So I really like the colors in this palette a lot. And then this is the Art Nouveau palette. I know this is another glorified rainbow palette, but I absolutely love it. The looks I created with this palette are like some of my favorite that I've ever done. So I don't know what it is, but this palette really inspires me and I like it a lot. These are my 2 Shroud Cosmetics palettes, and they are both collabs with Batty Bean, aka Betty Jean. This is the It's Freakin' Bats. This is the palette that I have that I don't need the Scooby-Doo one, and this quality on this one is, in my opinion, way better than that one. This is the Halloween palette. This is the one they just launched this year, and I really love this palette. I think it's really pretty. Yeah, so anyways, there we go. All right, Miss Natasha Denona. We have quite a few here. First up is the Mini Nude palette. I took this, no, oh God. Well, that's what happens when you film these videos. God, took a chunk out of that shadow. But anyways, I took this on my honeymoon to Greece with me, and it is an amazing palette to travel with. I really like it a lot. And then with Natasha's palettes being, are the minis magnetic? I don't think they are. I don't know. Somebody let me know in the comments. I don't think the minis are magnetic. I think these are magnetic, but somebody tell me in the comments. Anyways, oh, Jesus Christ. There's that chunk that we just lost. Let me get that out of the way. In case you were curious, that's what that chunk looks like on your finger. Not when you're trying to swatch it, but okay. Next up is the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. This isn't my all-time favorite palette of hers. I actually don't love it, but I do like using it in combination with some of my other palettes. So when I want pastel shades, I like to pull in to this palette. So yeah, I still like it. It's just not my favorite. This is the Loves palette. This was one of my favorite palettes. I think it was number 3 in 2020. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I used it like later on, like I didn't get it right when it launched, but I really, really enjoy this palette. I think it's got some really nice shades in there. This is the newest one that I think I have from her. This is the Retro Glam, and I really love me a pink and green color story. And I was pleasantly surprised with how much I like this palette. It is a bummer that the darkest shade is a shimmer, but I feel like I can pull in some other palettes if I really want to get a deeper look. So this is the Circo Loco palette. This palette, I like it, but I never know what to do with it. Like, it's just kind of like, it's a little all over the place, you know what I mean? So anyways, this palette a little bit confuses me, but I still really like it. This is the Zendo palette. I think this one is absolutely stunning. Anything that has like a cool color story and a warm color story has my heart. My only complaint with this palette is most of the shimmers aren't as special as some of her other shimmers, although the shade Yama is her typical like gorgeous shimmer quality in my opinion. This is the Sunrise palette. I am an Arizona State fan, so I always mention this, but this palette is perfect for me for doing looks when I'm going to ASU games. So this palette holds a special place in my heart for that exact reason. This is the Triochrome palette. I think this is my favorite palette that I have from her. I know it doesn't look like it because it doesn't look super used, but I swear I've reached for it quite a few times. But yeah, I really like the color story on this one. I think it's because you have like some of the like brights, but they're like muted brights, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain that. This is the Retro palette. This is another one that's a favorite of hers for me. I really love this palette. It's just, I love I just love using the mattes in this palette and then doing a special shimmer on the lid. I just think it always looks amazing and I love it. Okay. Next up is the Bronze palette. I think this palette is gorgeous, especially in the summer. I really do enjoy this palette a lot. Next up is the Glam palette. I always say that this palette is old reliable. If you just want a look that looks good, this is a great palette. I really do adore it. I think the cool tones work really well on my skin tone, so I'm a big fan of this palette. Last one from Natasha Denona. This is the My Dream palette. This palette is kind of like a conglomeration of like the last few palettes that I showed from her, but I do still really like it. I think it's a fun palette and it is a nice color story to use. All right, how many times do you think that's gonna happen in this video? Let's do this last stack that you can see, and then I'm giving myself a break. So this is Bella Beauty Bar's collab with Brittany Huffman. This is one of my favorite palettes this year. I think it's gorgeous. These duochromes down here, or multichromes, I don't know what they are, but anyways, they are stunning. The shade, like just every shade in this palette is gorgeous. And this is like a grungy neon rainbow. And yeah, I want to reach for this palette all the time. I love it so much. This is another collab palette that Bella Beauty Bar did with Lexi Lala Makeup. And Bella Beauty Bar is actually a brand I tried for the first time this year, and I am never looking back. They are incredible. I love it. I have only used this palette once so far, so I don't have a ton of thoughts, but yeah, I really like the matte color story on this, so I'm excited to play around with this palette a bit more. This is the Celestial Garden palette. This was their collab with M Jones 5018. It has the cake liners down here. And then as you can see, it's kind of like organized, like you have your yellow matte shimmer, orange matte shimmer, like etc. Yeah, you get the idea. I really like this palette. The duochrome shades in the middle are gorgeous. Bella Beauté Bar does a decent job on their mattes, but like knocks their shimmers out of the park. So I would, and their cake liners are really nice too. But I would say if you're buying this palette, you're really getting it for the shimmers and the cake liners. The mattes are nice, but they're not like the most amazing ever, if that makes sense. But they're also not bad. Like I can make their mattes work for me. They're just not my favorite mattes in my collection. This is their Angles of Illumination 3 palette, and I absolutely adore this palette because, like I said, their shimmers steal the show. They're gorgeous. They have nailed the perfect shimmer formula, in my humble opinion. This is my favorite. I think this is my favorite. I don't know if it's this one or the Brittany Huffman one. Oh, it's so hard. But anyways, this is the Strange and Unusual palette. This was the first palette I tried from them. These shimmers captured my heart, made me fall in love with the brand. I absolutely adore this palette. I think it's amazing. And I do just want to say, I know I was saying that their mattes aren't my favorite, but this brand is one of my favorite brands. So I want to make it clear that just because they don't have my favorite mattes doesn't mean I think they have a bad matte formula. They have a nice matte formula. All right, let me move these piles out of the way and put some new ones in here. Next up, let's chat about Kaleidos Makeup. This is their Futurism 6 Lunar Lavender. I like to keep these so I know what the shade names are, but that palette is absolutely gorgeous and I love it. And I really wish Kaleidos would go back to making these colors, like stories, these like, what are they, 6 pans? I thought they were really fun. So anyways, that's Lunar Lavender. This is a Futurism 3, Astro Pink, another one that I think is just so fun. I feel like they really did a cool job with these color stories and I love the packaging. It just gives me like outer space vibes. This is the Futurism 5 Electro Turquoise. We had a casualty on this one and my dark chocolate brown shade shattered, but I still kept the palette because, to be honest, I have dark chocolate brown like 500 times over in my collection, so it was okay. But anyways, I still think that's such a fun color story and I really like it. This is the Flower Punk palette. I also wouldn't be opposed to Kaleidos doing another one of these. This palette is cool because the top just totally comes off. I know it gives Melt Cosmetics vibes and that bothered some people, but to me, I loved it. I really like this 10-pan color story. I think they did such a cool job mixing like the grungy greens with the softer pinks and turquoise. I just think it's a really fun palette and color story, and I love the box on it, which is why I keep it in the box because I thought the box was really cool. Even though my box is starting to get damaged, so I should probably get rid of it at some point, but whatever. Last up from Kaleidos is the collab with Angelica Nyqvist. This is the Club Nebula palette. I think this palette is really pretty. It has such a fun color story to it, so I really enjoy it, and I like the quality of the mattes and shimmers that Kaleidos has. I'm just gonna get rid of this box now because it's not even closing anymore. I mean, look at that packaging though. Oh, they just do such a good job with packaging too. All right, we've got 2 stacks for Melt. This is one of the brands that I have a majority of my palettes from. Okay, so first up, this is the Impulsive palette. This palette is discontinued, but I purchased it on, I think, Poshmark earlier this year, and I really like it. I was kind of surprised at how much I like this formula. This shade Poppin' Bottles is like a duochrome, which I wasn't really expecting given when this palette came out, but I think this palette's really nice. It has a really fun color story. I will say that I get where people kind of struggled with like, what am I supposed to do with it? Because you have like all warm tone or green neutrals, and then it's like purple and blue shimmer. So it's kind of like, what, like, how do I combine this? But when I pull in other palettes, I like this palette, but I get where people are coming from, but I think the actual quality of the shadows and the shadows themselves are really nice. This palette is also pretty thick, so storing it is not the most fun. Next up is the Millennial Pinks palette. This is probably one of my least favorite palettes from Mel. I just don't love the quality on this one as much as I love their other palettes. I will say Pink Noise is beautiful as a face highlight. The shimmers in this palette I didn't have issue with. It's just that they're not as, I don't know what it was. I just didn't like them as much. It might be more of like a color story thing than an actual quality of the shadow thing. But yeah, that's just, yeah, I like this palette, but it's just not my favorite from Melt. All right, my 2 Beetlejuice collabs that Melt did. This is the Recently Deceased palette, and I want to love this palette, but
these three purples right here all look almost identical, and then same with these greens. Like this one's a little bit more yellow, that one's a little bit more green, but they're so similar. I felt like we could have had a little bit more variety in this palette, but this shade Neurotic, it is gorgeous. So yeah, still really like that palette. This palette actually, okay, so if you're new to my channel, I do a series where I rank all of my palettes from one brand, and then I do like a bracket style battle, like with a look from each palette. And I guess I'm spoiling this if you haven't seen it, but this palette won that battle when I did it for Melt. So it's called a new type of ranking. If you're curious, you can search that on my channel. But anyways, this is the Waiting Room palette. This palette is really pretty. It's just kind of like a red and cool tone gray color story. So yeah, I don't know, but there's something about it that I really like. I just enjoy reaching for that palette and using it. I like Melt does red, like burgundy tone mattes really well. Speaking of red mattes, let's talk about the Melt Bad Side Zodiac. This is the Fire palette. I talked a lot of crap about this palette because I am a fire sign, and I just get, sorry, my dogs are barking. As a fire sign, I just get tired of like every single Aries or fire sign palette being red, orange, yellow. I feel like there's ways to make a fire color story that's like a little bit more interesting. So yeah, I hate it on this palette for really that reason. I figured I might as well pull out the other Bad Side Zodiac palettes. This is the Air palette. I think this one's really pretty. I like this shimmer a lot. Too Faced is also a really nice shimmer. Flaky's Fine is just a dark purple shimmer, which honestly I don't reach for a ton. Reckless wasn't as good of a quality as I would have liked. All the mattes were pretty. So yeah, I like this palette. This one shade made me a little bit annoyed, but I think the rest of this palette's really nice, and I think it's a cute color story. This is the Bad Side Zodiac Water palette. I love the like murky blues in this palette. I think they're stunning, and I love this like how you can get kind of just a neutral look if you want with this palette, and then add the pop of blue or just keep it super neutral. I just feel like there's a little bit more variety in this one than like on initial glance than you are expecting. So I really like this palette. Last up of the Bad Side Zodiac, this is my favorite of the four. This is the Earth palette. I think there's a lot of variety and a lot of different looks you can do, and all three shimmer shades are awesome quality. The mattes are amazing. I think this is kind of gives like a good version of Subculture vibes, or like an updated version. I know Subculture had like slightly different shades, but that's kind of the overall vibe I get. But I really like this palette a lot. Okay, Melt Cosmetics, this is the Blueprint palette. This palette's really pretty. I really love the shimmers in this palette. I think they're gorgeous. And yeah, I just think they nailed the tones of these shimmers. You only have one blue matte, one brown matte, which do layer on themselves well, but to be honest, I always pull in other mattes from other palettes to create depth or like lightness in my look. All right, this is the Gemini 2 palette. I think this and the Bad Side Zodiac are the only palettes that I feel like Melt came out with this year. And that's it. Am I missing something? Did they do something else? I feel like it's just those. But I adore this palette. I think this color story is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite Melt palettes of all time. I think it's beautiful. This is the Melt Cosmetics Radioactive palette. This is another one that I picked up off of Poshmark earlier this year. I always wanted this palette, but just never found it in me to pull the trigger because I didn't want to spend that much money on like an older palette, but I've loved this. I think it's a great. I really like it. I think they did such a good a good job with the quality of these neon shades. Next up is the 27 palette. This color story is pretty boring, but it's good. It's nice. I feel like you don't have a ton of depth because it's like mid-tone to deep mattes. There's not really any light mattes. You're just kind of similar tones or like a darker. I shouldn't say deep. It's really, they're just different variations of mid-tone. They're not like, they don't go super deep, but they also don't go super light. So you don't get a ton of contrast in them. And I don't like either of the shimmers in this, but it's a nice palette. It's a good one to reach for when you're like, I just need they're interesting tones of mattes, I should say. Like this one's like kind of like a grayish brown. Like that I feel like is a unique matte tone. It's just kind of boring. I don't know. Anyways, whatever. I don't even think I'm making sense. This is my brunette palette. I used to harp on this all the time, but I'm so mad that my packaging ripped on this one. But anyways, this is a really good go-to neutral palette. Like if you're just like, I need a palette that I can just create nice neutral looks and that's it. I really like this one. The shade Musk
is amazing. If you're my skin tone, which is pale, the shade Suede is really great for either, you know, if you're just wanting to like set an eyeshadow primer and not really put any shadow on, or put this under your brow bone, like it's just perfect. So this is a palette that I just I'm pretty frequently just reaching for like a shade here and there, since I don't tend to do a ton of neutral looks, but I really like that one. This is the Smoke Sessions palette. I also picked this one on Poshmark this year. Similar to the blueprint, you only have one green matte, one brown matte. I'm going to pull in other mattes when I use this palette, but I do really like the quality of the shimmers on this one. I think it's really nice. She's in Parties. This palette is absolutely gorgeous. I think this was this my number one 2 or 3 years ago? I think this is one of my top palettes 2 or 3 years ago. I love this palette. I think it's amazing. Skeleton Kiss is an amazing face highlight. I love the purple tone mattes. I think this palette's really nice. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of words other than nice, pretty, amazing. This is the Milk Cosmetics Amore Mariposas palette. This was the palette that they launched last year for holiday, and I really, really liked this palette. I think the neons in here are fun. The kind of pastel shades are fun. You have like the deep purple shades. There's just something about this color story that I have a lot of fun with, and I really enjoy playing with and reaching for. This is the Rust palette, and this palette has also really unique mattes. All of the shimmers are deep. I don't think the quality of these shimmers are bad. They're just really dark. So unless you're doing a dark smoky eye, there's not really anything to do with them. But I do really like the mattes in this palette. I think this palette's really amazing. You can see how it goes from super light to super dark. So yeah, I think this is a really good one. Next up is the Gemini palette, the OG Gemini. I love this palette. You have your browns and then your green and black, and I love the way it's organized. I love the looks I can create. You can kind of flip from side to side and create really interesting looks, or stick to this half or this half, and it's just amazing. If you don't really want to think through it, I really like the way that it's organized. You're like, just there's a look, the end. It's really nice. I like this palette a lot. This is the 420 palette. I do feel like this palette requires a little bit more finessing than I'm looking to give sometimes, but it's beautiful when you can get it where you want it to go. But yeah, these two shades right here are absolutely gorgeous. You have the one shimmery shade Shatter, which is pretty too. I think this is such a fun and cool color story. I'd love to see Melt launch another one of these palettes. I feel like they've gotten away. Well, I guess they did Gemini too, so maybe they haven't totally gotten away from it. This is the Mary Jane palette. I love this palette. This is like an interesting cool tone neutral palette. There's got like kind of like a greenish like tone to Mary Jane. Yeah, it's just really pretty. I like this palette a lot. Okay, last but not least, let's just make that look gorgeous for a second and appreciate it. So this is the Vita palette. This is a palette that I've had for forever, but I really love the mattes in this palette. I do not like the shimmer quality in this palette, but the mattes are amazing. I love reaching for this and pulling in some special shimmers from some other palettes. This is the Muerte palette. Same thing. Shimmers aren't my favorite. These ones I think are better than the Vita ones. They're just still not my favorite, but I love the quality of the mattes in this palette. I think they're amazing. Even if I do use the shimmers, I feel like the looks in this palette still come out really nice. So yeah, I absolutely adore this palette. All right, next up, let's go through my Blend Bunny palettes. This is the Primal palette. This is what that palette looks like. It's absolutely stunning. You have like a pastel rainbow, a regular rainbow, a like dark grungy rainbow, a shimmer rainbow, and then giant white and black shades that, to be honest, I think I've only used one each. So not necessarily something that I'm gonna, like the white and black aren't something that I necessarily needed giant pans of, but I get why they did it, and I still really like this palette. This is the newest palette, I believe, from Blend Bunny. This is the All Done Up palette, and I am really enjoying this palette. I have used these 2 rows over here, so I haven't used the whole thing yet, but it's been really fun to test out. I think this is their best shimmer formula that they've done. I really like how they did these shimmers a lot. So yeah, I like this palette, and I like that it's a smaller version of their other palettes. Like, do you see the difference? It's a small one, whereas the other ones that they've done are big. This is the Surge palette. You have neons, and then like grungy pastels, and then like grungy jewel tones, and I love it. This is by far my favorite of the 4 palettes I have from them. I think it's gorgeous. I don't like the shimmer row that much, but I can make it work. And honestly, I'm really reaching for this palette for the mattes, and I'll reach for special shimmers if I want to use them. Last from Blend Bunny is the Dollhouse palette. This is the palette that I have used the most, which it kind of surprises me, but maybe, I guess it's not that surprising. Because this is, what did they say when they launched this? They said this is the neutral palette for color lovers and the colorful palette for neutral lovers. Anyways, and I think that's so true, and such a good way to describe it. I don't hate the shimmer formula on this one as much as I dislike it on the Surge palette, but I still think the All Done Up is their best version of their shimmers thus far. All right, two more brands to get through in this stack, and then we've got more. Okay, this is the Ace Beauté Tropical Vibes palette. This color story is pretty similar to the Milk Cosmetics 420 color story, but it has the pop of teal. It's a little different, you know? But anyways, I love the quality on this palette. It is amazing. It is Ace Beauté's standard quality. It is their newer formula, so it's the standard quality since they've done that, and I think it's just incredible, and I'm so glad that I picked that up on sale for Black Friday. This is the Oceanic palette. So funny story on this one, I bought this in the original formula, struggled hard, and I didn't struggle with any of my other Ace Beauté palettes in the original formula, so I just assumed that like maybe blue eyeshadow was just not my thing, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I decluttered that palette. And then I missed it so much that when they launched this palette in the new formula, I bought it. So yeah, I'm happy I have this back in my collection. And I will say I haven't done a look solely using this palette. I've really just pulled this in when I wanted certain blues and things. So I can't speak to whether the issues I had before were just me not knowing how to use blue eyeshadow or if it was the old formula. I don't know because I haven't tried that out yet. Ugh, I know I'm a terrible person, but I do really like this palette, and I have pulled in the shades with other looks and I haven't had issues. I just haven't done a look using only this palette. This is the Serenity palette. This is brand new. I just got this for Christmas, and I think it's gorgeous. It's a really pretty neutral color story. You got lots of mattes and just a couple of shimmers, so I think this is going to be a really nice palette. So I'm excited to try it out. This is the Nostalgia palette. I think this palette is gorgeous. I love this palette. I love the shimmers in this palette. And, or not the shimmers. Well, I do like the shimmers. That's what I meant. I love the mattes in this palette is what I meant to say. But anyways, I think this is a nice palette. It looks like I have hard pan in some of those shimmers, so I might need to fix that. This is the Ambiance palette. This is the newest palette, I think, from them, and I've really been enjoying it so far. I think the shimmers in this palette are gorgeous. I love this color story a lot. I think it's really pretty. This is the Paletopoly palette. This is by far my favorite palette from Ace Beauté. I don't want to spoil my ranking video where I ranked all the eyeshadow palettes I tried in 2022, but let's just say this one was pretty high up. I love the shimmers, love the mattes, love the color story, love everything about this palette. I think it's so fun. It did come with a game, which, you know, the game was fun, but I will be honest, I reach for this palette more just to do what I want with it. Last stack from this section. Huda Beauty. So we have the Mercury Retrograde palette, which is one of my favorite palettes of all time. I absolutely adore this palette. The color story, the shimmers, the mattes, everything about it I think is amazing. This is the newest palette from Huda Beauty. This is the Empowered palette. I like this palette. I debated decluttering it because I feel like I have the My Dream palette, and they're like overall similar vibes, but this one I feel like goes a little bit more orange when on the eye, at least on my skin tone. So I'm keeping it. I know it's slightly different, but I really like this palette. I enjoyed it a lot. So I don't mind having it in my collection. This is the Naughty Nude palette. I just got this for Christmas as well. And I'm excited to finally have this palette in my collection. I think it looks gorgeous. I think it looks really fun. This is the Rose Quartz palette. I had such a blast with this palette last year. I've used it a bit this year, but not as much. But this is a really stunning color story, and I feel like I need to reach for it a bit more. Let me move these out of the way and bring in a new set of palettes to talk about. I have the last set of palettes where, like brands where I have multiple palettes, so we're moving along after this. It'll just be the brands where I only have one palette from them. Anyways, this is the Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 4 Transcendence palette. If you're new here, I absolutely love and adore everything about this palette. It is amazing and gorgeous. And when I say like, oh, I like the mattes in this palette, so I can just reach for special shimmers if I want to, this is the palette that I'm talking about. And I don't know why I just slammed my hand into it, but I did. Anyways. I really like this palette. It's really, really pretty. Next up is the Lightwork Volume 3, and I like this palette. I don't love this one. Obviously, I hit pan in this shade. I think these highlights in the center are beautiful, amazing, gorgeous. I love them. I love a lot of the shades in this palette, but the like more creamy shades creased on me so badly, and I never found a way to make those work for me, so they're not my favorite. I did see somebody that said like if they put them above their crease on their eye just for like to add like a pop of color or a pop of like, you know, really intense shimmer multi-chrome goodness, that they didn't experience creasing. So I haven't used them that way, so maybe I will enjoy them a bit more, but I do overall like a majority of the shades in this palette, but I think the volume 4 is definitely better out of the two. All right, next up is Nomad Cosmetics. Let's talk about the Hudson Valley palette. This palette is a fall dream. That's really the best way to describe it. I think it's gorgeous. I love that you have the cool tone mattes, the warm mattes, and then the shimmers in the middle. Just really like that layout. I think it's really, really pretty. This is the America's Parks palette. I really like the color story on this palette. I think the shimmers in this palette are gorgeous, and I just think this is a fun, like sort of grungy, like natural tones. I think that's how they described it, because these are all colors you can find in nature since it's based on America's parks, and I just really like the theming and the color story. This is the Haunted Europe palette. Let's see if we can make this thing, yeah, shift. Sort of working. Anyways, I really like this palette a lot. It's kind of a unique color story, but you've got some neutrals in here, and then you have lots of pops of color, so I feel like there's a lot of different things you can do with this palette. So I do really like it, but I do kind of have to think about like, what do I want to do when I look at it, but I do think it's a really pretty palette. This is the Fête de Provence palette. I adore this palette. I think the color story on this palette is amazing. I like it a lot. I love the grays. I love the purples, the yellows. I seriously love everything about this palette. I think it's so beautiful. This is the Paradise Islands palette. I think this color story is gorgeous. I love the sparkliness of some of these shimmers. I think it's incredible. And yeah, I had a really good time playing with this palette in the spring and summertime. This is the Bosque Nuboso de Monteverde palette. This is the Cloud Forest palette, I think they call it. But anyways, yeah, super pretty. I really love how they do the theming of their palettes. Like this one, for example, they did all the greens because they said they were inspired by the greenery in the Cloud Forest, and then they did the pops of colors to represent like the wildlife or like the, you know, natural florals that occur in the forest. So I thought that was really interesting. I do struggle with this color story because most of the shimmers except for like one are green. So then I'm like, what, like I don't know what to do with the other colors of matte. So I do have a little bit of a hard time figuring out what to do with this palette, but I do think each shade individually is absolutely stunning. This is the Iceland Fire and Ice palette. I love this palette. I love these two shimmers in particular down here. That one's, not that one. That one's also really nice as well. I think this palette is amazing and I love everything about it. This is the Whistler Snow Lodge palette. This palette has lots of really pretty shimmers in it. It's another color story that I kind of like. If I'm not doing the green mattes or the blue mattes, I like don't really know what I should be doing with it. So I struggle a little bit with this color story as well, but I do really like the quality of the shadows in this one. Let's do Viseart because we've got like a million of these Viseart palettes. Viseart is one of my favorite brands. This is the Petite Mattes Editorial Brights. This is a perfect palette to pull in when I just need a little something extra from the mattes with any of my other palettes, or if I just want to combine this with like my special shimmery shades. This is a really nice palette. Definitely packs a punch. All right, let's talk about the Paris Edit palette next. Look at how gorgeous that neutral color story is. Like, I mean, come on, those two shimmer shades like are just so pretty. I love this palette. I love the color story of it. I love the mattes that they chose, the shimmers that they chose. I think everything about this palette is so perfect. This is the Paris Etoile palette. Look at that gorgeous Paris skyline. I love the packaging on this one. This is perfect for like just a
smoky, sultry eye. I love that you have mostly the cool tone neutrals with the pops of blue and purple. I think it's really pretty. I like that one a lot. Then we have the Petite Pro Soleil palette. I did buy it when they relaunched it in like this packaging, which I think is gorgeous. It's such a pretty palette. I love this shimmer here. I don't know if you're gonna really, yeah, you can kind of see the purple to blue flip. It's so pretty. I love this palette a lot. I think Viseart has an awesome quality. And then I just wanted to show, like, that's the size of the palettes. Like, they're pretty small and compact, which I love. This is the Petite Pro Solstice palette. This is another palette that I brought on my honeymoon and had an absolute blast wearing and using. I think the mattes in this palette are really nice. I think the shimmers are gorgeous. And this just, the tones of this, I felt like looked really good on my skin tone and with my hair. And yeah, anyways, just a good, big fan of that one. This is the Shoo Shoo palette. I also bought this one for the, oh, I hope this video hasn't been like blurry this entire time. But this is the packaging on it, the relaunched packaging. I think it's adorable. This is what the palette looks like. I think it's absolutely stunning. There's like a greenish, like pink, like a peach green duochrome in the corner here. That's gorgeous. I love the like hot pink and coral, neon coral colors mixed with the neutrals in here. I just think it's amazing. I love this one. Okay, this is the Petite Pro Trois palette. Oops. This palette is fun. It's not my most exciting one, but I do love the green shimmer that you have here. And then I think it's a unique-ish color story, but I don't reach for this one nearly as much as I reach for some of the other Viseart palettes that I have. Next up is the San Francisco Etoile palette, and I want to show the San Francisco skyline. I absolutely love this theme that they do, but I think this palette is so cool. It's like very warm tone neutrals with the orange and then the pop of like dark teal. I really, really like this one, and I was kind of surprised how much I enjoyed this one. This is the London Etoile palette. There's the London skyline on that one. And that's what the palette looks like. Absolutely stunning. Love it so much. Yeah, I mean, it's what I like about Viseart palettes is they're neutral palettes with a little bit of a twist. So these are definitely palettes that I tend to reach for more when I'm have meetings at work, that I want to look nice, you know, like that I don't want like bright green eyeshadow for. Not that there's anything wrong with bright green eyeshadow, but anyways, that's just what I feel like I get from Viseart. Let's look at the Petit Four palettes that I have. These are all, okay. These are the three that I got that they launched for holiday this year. We'll start with Lila Duh. That is what that palette looks like. It is a pretty kind of cool tone purple. And I know I said earlier that I don't like quads and I planned on decluttering most of them. I'm keeping these because I think I'm going to put all of my Viseart shades into one big magnetic palette, so they won't be quads for long. But this is the Violetta. This is by far my favorite one. Even though the shade's a little bit messy, I think this palette created this quad can create such a nice look with that color story. This is the Amelie palette, and I really didn't think I'd like this one, but this is actually a really pretty color story, and it looks really nice on the lids. I think they did a good job with this shimmer formula, so I do like this one. Next up are my two Petit Fours from their like macaron collection. Look at that packaging, isn't it so cute? Okay, anyways, this is Pistache. And I like this one a lot. I feel like I get a little bit more variety out of this one than I typically do from quads. So I'm a big fan of that one. And then this one is Lavande, which I don't know that I get a ton of variety out of this one because I feel like I have these shades in some of my other Viseart palettes, but it's still pretty. And I love purple, so whatever. This is the Petite Mattes Dark palette. This is not a standalone palette for me. I basically just reach for this to deepen up any palettes that I feel like don't go deep enough, and it's perfect for that. I think it has a really gorgeous deep matte formula. This is the Dark Edit palette, and so I was sick of waiting for Viseart to restock this palette, so I saw it for sale without the box on Poshmark, and I grabbed it, and then Viseart restocked this like a week later, so I'm still kind of salty about it, but I think this palette's really pretty. I think I'm just salty about how that all worked out for me, and I do need a slightly lighter shade to pull in with this one, but I mean, I have a ton of Viseart shades, so that's not like a deal breaker for me, but yeah, I like this palette. I think it's nice.
I'm just mad it's the only one that doesn't have the packaging, but I guess if I put these all in one giant palette, I won't care about that anymore. This is the Petite Matte's Cool palette. I think this palette is absolutely gorgeous. I love it so much. I think it's so beautiful. I feel like I can create looks with just this palette. I can combine this palette with my special shimmers or add it to palettes where I need like a lighter shade to help blend things out. I really like this one a lot. I'm a big fan of that one. These are all of my étendues. Okay, here we go. So this is the Les Marais étendue. This is the newest one that they launched this year. That's what the packaging on it looks like. And that's the inside of the palette. It's a little boring, but you have the pops of purple and orange and yellow, and I really like it. And I also really like that shimmer shade in the corner. So I still enjoy this, but it's definitely like a warm tone neutral with a couple pops of color. This is the Bijouette étendue. This is one of my favorite palettes of all time. I absolutely adore the packaging on this one. And I think this palette has just such a fun color story. I know it's kind of like just cool tone mattes, but these shimmers work so well with those matte shades. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's magic in a palette for this one for me. I love it. All right, this is the Violette étendue palette. I adore purple eyeshadow, so this is one of my favorites. I think the shimmers in this palette are nice. The mattes are incredible. I love that you have purple tone, like more of like a mauve tone neutral that to go with the purple shades. I just think it works so well. I love what they did with this one. Next up is the Cashmere étendue. This palette is I don't know what happened to all the packaging on these. They just got really dirty, but this palette is definitely like sultry, smoky beautifulness. You get like true neutrals to like a pinky leaning neutral. And I just really like this palette a lot. I think it's really pretty. All right, next up is the Soleil La Plage palette. And this palette pleasantly surprised me. I bought this one mainly for the packaging because look how freaking cute that is. I can't stand it. But yeah, I saw a lot of people with looks of this palette that I just loved on Instagram. And so I went for it. And this palette is like surprising how good it is. Like that shade has almost like a duochrominess to it. I don't know how to explain it. These shimmers are way more special than I thought they would be. They just look amazing on the lid. And I really enjoy this palette a lot. I got it on sale. It's always a plus, right? I got most of these Viseart palettes on sale because I think I tried Viseart for the first time last year and I only had like 3 palettes and I picked up the rest of these this year. This is the Paris Love Letter palette. This one is messy because one of the shades broke. Ooh, and it looks like it's just getting, oh yeah. That shade is just slowly crumbling bit by bit. Every time I pull this palette out, it gets worse and worse. So it's kind of a mess. But yeah, that's what this palette looks like. It's really pretty. I like that shade, even though it keeps breaking every time I touch it. And this whole palette is like, just, wow. I'm going to have to deal with that at another time. Like, look how dirty that got. Ugh. All right, let's talk about Adept Cosmetics. We have the Heather Austin and Adept collab. This was the first Adept Cosmetics palette I ever tried, and I absolutely fell in love with their shimmers. They are a little bit high maintenance, and I mean that in like to get them to work as well as they possibly can. There is some glitter glue that is needed, which is fine, but I also feel like they look okay without the glitter glue, so it doesn't, I don't know. Does that make sense? So it's like they can be kind of, you know, finicky, but not that much. I do not love the mattes in this palette. I didn't have the best of time with them. I think layering them, it just doesn't go well. So if you use this shade by itself, it's fine. If you use Alice by itself, it's fine. It's really the 2 darker mattes that I seem to struggle with, but I would never use those on their own. I was always building them on top of these, and I just don't think they built well. But anyways, shimmers are incredible, absolutely gorgeous, and make the palette well worth it, even if I don't like the mattes. This is the Plain Jane Remastered palette, and I adore this palette. I adore the shimmers in this palette. I don't feel like these are as like creasy and require the glitter glue to avoid being creasy as the Heather Austin palette, so I don't know what the difference is, but I really, really like the shimmers in this palette. Next up is Ninhydrin. Also really love the shimmers in this palette. This one packs like a bigger punch, I feel like, and I didn't really have issues with either of the matte shade in this palette, but again, I didn't try to layer them, so that's what makes me think that was the issue with the other ones. But this palette is gorgeous and I absolutely love it. This is the Minka palette. This is the newest palette from Adept and I love it. These two multi-chrome shades are so gorgeous. I love these like glittery shades. They are kind of a mess, but once you get them on the eye, well worth it. I definitely recommend glitter glue on these only because they're so sparkly that kind of the chunks will flake off and get all over your face without a glitter glue. But I do still really like that palette. All right. Let's do Miss Lunar Beauty. This is the Life's a Drag Facelift palette. I think this palette is really fun and I love this. I know I didn't pick this up when they initially launched this palette because I felt like I had Life's a Drag, but once the quality started going down on that one, I wanted to get this one. So I really, really enjoy the color story on this. This is the 12 Days of Lunar palette. I have only used this palette once, but I really like this palette. I think they did an interesting job with the color story. It definitely goes more neutral and I feel like it doesn't quite match the packaging. This goes a little bit more fall, whereas the packaging is like truly winter, but I do think these are all really pretty shades. So am I mad about it? I'm not sure. Okay, this is the Moonspell Volume 2. Probably would have made sense to do Moonspell Volume 1 first, but whatever, we didn't. This is what the inside of this palette looks like. It's gold, so it has the reflective packaging. I really like this palette. I know a lot of people didn't like the quality of that one, but I didn't really have issues with it. I liked it a lot. This is the Eternal Eclipse palette. I think this palette is gorgeous. Such a pretty neutral palette with, you know, the pops of blue and gray. I think it's really, really stunning. This is Moonspell Volume 1. Packaging is iconic. I love this palette. Yeah, I think this is a really nice palette. I love the mattes in this palette. The shimmers aren't like the most amazing shimmers I have in my collection, but this palette's also quite a few years old, so I think, you know, shimmers have changed a little bit since then, but they don't perform terribly. I actually just used this the other day and I didn't have too bad of a time with it. And last up from Lunar Beauty is Strawberry Dream. This palette, I don't reach for a ton, but when I do, I really love how the look comes out, so it's really funny. I just don't gravitate towards this color story as much, but I do think this is a solid palette, matte and shimmer wise. If you like this color story and feel like you'd reach for this color story, I highly recommend it if this is still available, but it's, yeah, it's just funny. I just don't grab for it as much. Last up of the brands that have multiple palettes from them, we have, I'm going to move that one down there. Okay, we have Odin's Eye. So this is the Solmon 2 palette. I think this is a gorgeous, like, half cool tone, half warm, or part warm color story. I love it so much. I think the shimmers in this palette are amazing. I've only not used one shade and it's this one. If there's one eyeshadow shade that I don't tend to reach for, it's a dark purple matte, which is funny because I love purple eyeshadow. But anyways, this is the collab they did with Judy. This is the Red Dragon palette, and that is what the inside of the palette looks like. It's a gorgeous neutral palette. I won't go harp on it too long because that palette is discontinued. This is the collab they did with the Fancy Face. This is the Hummingbird palette. Similarly to the Red Dragon palette, this is also discontinued, but I think the shimmers in this palette are really, really pretty. Then the Annette's Makeup Corner Giant Wolves palette. I love this one so much. Also discontinued, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but I love the color story, and I think Annette did such an amazing job on that one. We have the Angelica Nyqvist and Odin's Eye collab. This is the Hella palette, and it's funny because I really didn't feel like I reached for this palette that much. I was like, oh, this palette, like, I don't love this color story. I don't gravitate towards it. But then when I looked at my, like, end of the year, like, how many palettes, like, how many times I've used each palette, this was one of my most used palettes in my collection. I think this was in the top 10. If it wasn't in the top 10, it was, like, 11 or 12. Like, it was right outside the top 10 of palettes that I've reached for a lot. So I was pretty surprised with that. So anyways, thought that was funny that I really didn't feel like I reached for this one, but apparently I did. But it's a really pretty palette. I don't know why I went on that, but anyways. Okay, these are also discontinued, so let me be quick about it. This is the Christmas Eve palette. It is a very pretty color story and has a gorgeous multi-chrome down here called Gorgeous. This is the Merry Christmas palette. This one is also very stunning. Of the two, I think this one's my favorite. I like this one a lot, but yeah, super pretty color story. Okay. those are all of the palettes that or all of the brands that I have multiple palettes for. So let me move these out of the way, and then I'll bring in all of my palettes where I only have one palette from each brand. Sort of. Some of them I only have one because you watched me declutter some earlier. But anyways, be right back. Last stack of palettes. We are almost done. Woo-hoo. Okay, this is the Give Me Glow Bad Witch Club. It says season fall, which makes me feel like there might be other seasons. But anyways, this is a palette that I got last year from Give Me Glow. I love this palette. I love the matte color story on this. I think with all the special shimmer shades I have in my collection, this palette pairs perfectly with those. The shimmers in this palette are actually really nice, but they're just a little bit dark on my skin tone, so I do need to pull in a lighter shimmer when I want to, but sometimes even doing like an all matte look with this palette is really fun. So yeah, I love this one. Okay, this is another quad. I was like, I'm getting rid of these Kaleidos quads because I don't like quads, and then I have all these quads. But some of these quads are really special, so if it's not a super special quad, I just don't want it. But anyways, this is the Carlo Cosmetics Romance Quad. This one has the most insane multi-chromes I think I have in my collection. They're of course not going to get captured on camera, but they are beautiful. I love this quad so much. So yeah, that's not going anywhere, and I think the packaging is super fun. Next up is the collab between Kathleen Lights and Il Makiage. I have this one in the box because I felt like my palette was getting like really scratched up, but this is what the inside of the palette looks like. It's a little bit dirty, but this is truly such a perfect neutral palette. I love this palette so much. I think the shimmers are amazing. The mattes are amazing. The longevity on this palette is insane. Like I'm not even kidding you. Like it lasts all day. So I really like this palette. Okay, this is the Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette. I really love this palette. I love the color story of it. I love the performance of the shimmers. I don't know why I like the shimmers in this palette so much more than the ones in the Meet Me at Midnight palette, but I do. I just feel like there's something special about this palette and this color story. So I like this one a lot. And I love anything Greek mythology. So yeah, I'm a fan. This is the Menagerie Cosmetics Sugar High palette. I've gone back and forth. I might add this to my stack of palettes that if I can depot them, I will keep, because I just feel like I don't reach for this palette because it's missing something, and so it prevents me from wanting to reach for it. So maybe if I combine it with some of those other singles, or not singles, but other palettes that I want to turn into like singles in a big magnetic palette, like maybe I'll reach for this one more. So I'm going to add that to that pile. Okay, this is the Beauty Bay Book of Magic palette. I love this one. Seriously, like I keep trying other Beauty Bay palettes, but nothing tops this one. I think this is amazing. I love this color story. I love the shades in here. I think Beauty Bay has really nice quality for the price too. So if you ever see a color story you like from them, definitely jump on it. This is the Glamlight Barbie Dream Summer palette. I was pleasantly surprised by this palette. I love it so much, which is why I was disappointed in the Scooby-Doo ones. I felt like the quality didn't quite live up to this quality. But I think this color story is so fun. I like it a lot. This is the Cosmic Brushes Serenity palette. I love this color story, love this palette, and for the price, like not just for the price, it's amazing just in general, but when you give consideration to the price, it is also incredible. So I really like this palette a lot. This is the Martine Cosmetics Martine's Diner palette, and I've debated if I want to declutter this one, and I've landed on not because I think it's so cute. I love the impressions in the shades. I think they're adorable. I love the theming. It's like 50s, like diner, like retro diner themed. So yeah, I really like this palette a lot. I think it's really cute. The shimmers aren't my absolute favorite, but I still think it's a fun color story, and sometimes the soft shimmer is a good time. So this is the Sydney Grace and Mel Thompson collab, the Tiny Marvels palette. I think the shimmers in this palette are incredible. It's got a really nice matte color story too, so I'm a huge fan of this palette. This is the Clarity Cosmetics Apocalypse palette. I've been on an up and down journey with this palette. I didn't like it when I first tried it, and then the second time I tried it, I fell in love with it. So I guess it was just a down and up journey. But anyways, I really like this palette. Their pans are giant, which is overwhelming, but I still really like the color story of this. And I think the multi-chrome shades in this palette are so gorgeous. This is the Be Perfect Cosmetics and Stacey Marie Carnival 5 Interstellar palette. As I've mentioned, I love space, so anything space themed gets my attention. And I love this palette. I love this cool tone section. I love kind of the rainbow to it. I just think everything about this palette is amazing, and I love it so much. If you're curious about looks with this palette, I do have a 7 looks video with this palette on my channel. This is Spellbound Beauty, the Witchcraft palette. They're gonna release, I saw them tease like a Heart Killer palette that's supposed to come out soon. I cannot wait to see more because I want that so bad, because these shimmers are incredible. This palette was only like $25 on Etsy when they had it up, and I'm like shocked because the quality on it is so nice. Like the mattes are decent, but the duochrome multi-chromes in the middle, oh, they're so good. So good. So can't wait to see what else this brand does. Last palette that we are talking about, this is the Cash Beauty Color Trip palette. This palette also has the water activated liners that I kind of need to clean up because they're a little bit of a mess, but I really like this palette. I like this color story a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. And yeah, that was everything. So let me know in the comments if you have any of these palettes, which palettes you like to use or pull, or just your overall approach to decluttering. I feel like I got rid of a decent number. Let me count how many palettes I got rid of. I'm not going to count all the palettes I think I know how many palettes I have. So hold on, I'll be right back and give you a breakdown. Okay, so we got rid of 28 palettes, like totally out of my collection. Well, 4 of them are like saved for like memory purposes, but 28 just out of the rotation altogether. And then 8 that I'm keeping for either practicing depotting or trying to depot purposes. Really, there's just the one practice one. So it's 7 that I'm going to actually try and depot and put in a magnetic palette, and then the 1 that I'm practicing on. So anyways, that was that breakdown. And then I have 140 left, which is still a lot, but yeah, it's still a lot, I'll be honest. But I really like all the ones that I have. I don't know that there's any other ones that I'm ready to get rid of, and I don't want to force myself to get rid of anything just to get rid of it. So I'm pretty happy with the progress I made. I think I did a good job getting rid of the stuff that I don't think I'm going to miss. So anyways, that was it for me. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!